Hey guys, welcome back. This is the story about what if Naruto was a hollow. Before we start, please subscribe to the channel and like the video as well, it really means a lot. So let's start the what if. Is this really all the two of you have? And you're a captain. Don't you see, I've been going easy on you to give you a chance to bring out your Bankai, but I got tired of waiting, and well, you can see the result. Jiraiya looked around himself as Grimmjow stood before him, while Neji and Kiba lay crumpled at his feet, blood leaking from moderate wounds they had on their body. This is pathetic, you two. You know as well as anyone that we can't let these Arrancar enter the palace. We have to defeat them quickly, so get up now. You guys are seated officers. Are you just going to let those pussy wounds beat you? Jiraiya scolded. We know, Jiraiya-sama. We're fine. Shikamaru sighed, slowly dragging himself to his feet. Neji got up not too long after him, and the two wasted no time in putting distance between themselves and Grimmjow. The sound of rampaging hollows all around them made them slightly nervous, but Grimmjow wasn't going to give them any time to recover. He opened his elbow like it were a chamber, and 5 pointed objects were revealed underneath. He's doing something. We need to guard, quickly. Shikamaru told his two teammates. Jiraiya didn't need to be told twice, and he waved his sword directly in front of him. Sankabe. Jiraiya's Sanpakdo blasted the thick green fluid coating his sword onto the ground, where it rose as a form of barrier around all 3 of the Shinigami. All 5 of the darts impacted the wall, slowing it down for a moment while preventing injuries to the group. Jiraiya wasn't done yet, putting more force into the wall to try and make it hold up against the darts that Grimmjow had fired at them. They were drilling through the liquid slowly but surely. Move! Jiraiya shouted when he realized it was no good, before he leapt out of the way without a second thought. Neji and Shikamaru followed suit, and they were fortunate enough to get by before the darts penetrated the thick acid barrier at a great speed and flew past them. They were strong enough to put a hole in the ground where they impacted. Ugh! Shikamaru and Neji turned around quickly after they had tumbled along the ground to avoid the darts, trying to locate the source of the noise. Grimmjow was on the move once again, and from the sounds of things, he had gotten to Jiraiya in the confusion, and had followed up on his attack perfectly. The situation wasn't looking good. From their vantage point, Grimmjow was seconds away from impaling Jiraiya with one of his paws, and the captain was desperately trying to keep him at bay with his sword. When Grimmjow shot his other arm out, he drew blood from Jiraiya, clipping him across the face. Jiraiya splashed some acid on Grimmjow, who chuckled even as his white mask material began to corrode and crack. The Arrancar used his agility to flip over Jiraiya, delivering a devastating kick to the captain's back from behind. Grimmjow was definitely faster than Jiraiya, and he had a fair bit of power underneath his slim frame. Santamari. Jiraiya sensed the danger that he was in, and he once again blasted a multitude of Toad's stomach acid off of the end of his shuriken. This time, however, he pointed it downwards into the ground, and allowed it to engulf himself as well. Stand back, you two! Don't come near me, he shouted at Neji and Shikamaru. They nodded in obedience as they began to notice what was happening. Jiraiya was standing in the middle of the stomach acid, and was not getting dissolved. Rather, it was coating him in a protective layer without actually harming him at all. Ah, come on! This stuff again! Grimmjow growled. The pool of acid was about 10 feet in diameter while being around 3 feet deep, and Grimmjow didn't know how that sword was capable of producing so much of it. Fortunately for Grimmjow, he could just hang out in the air without touching the acid before him, but Jiraiya wasn't about to let him just camp out up there. The former Toad Sage cocked his sword over his shoulder, before swinging it lightly. A wave of acid crashed into midair, and Grimmjow was forced to gather his wits and move to the side to avoid the small wave, but Jiraiya sent 2 more his way after the first one failed. You trying to drown me in this stuff? It won't work as long as I'm up here. Grimmjow stated, firing a blue Zero at another wave that was headed his way. Before Jiraiya could even respond, a shadow fell over Grimmjow. What the? Grimjow said, as the shadow fell over him. He tried to move, but found that as soon as the shadow had fallen over him, he was frozen in midair. Good job, Shikamaru. Niji complimented. You. So, you had something like this up your sleeve the entire time, didn't you fucker? Grimjow said, struggling to move his body to look at Shikamaru. Said Shinigami was apparently so relaxed he had sat down, but before him was a completely black blade that was stabbed into the ground. The shadow that the sword cast was much bigger than it should have been, and was covering him. You were really easy to catch, so easy in fact that it wasn't even troublesome. For all your power, you really don't require a complicated strategy to be outwitted. He trailed off. So, I just allowed my Shurikai's special ability to work its magic, and while it does its part, I can just sit here and relax. Jiraiya-sama, you can take it from here. Ha! I underestimated your abilities, Shikamaru. You sure you've got him contained? He asked, and when a nod from Shikamaru gave him approval, he grabbed his sword. Well, then there's no need for me to hold back on this. Can't allow this wily Arrancar to get away unscathed. He said, before he casually dropped his sword into the pool of acid. Bankai. Gamma no Kukyugaku. Slowly but surely, droplets of Toad's stomach acid began rising from the pools that Jiraiya had created earlier. His sword flew back into his hands, though this time it was not coated in the familiar acid that made up his Shurikai. The acid turned into a concentrated stream of liquid that flowed in midair. It was like Jiraiya's weapon was a conductor's baton, and wherever he chose to point, the acid would follow in a symphony. In its default state, it formed a thin ring around Jiraiya's body. What do you plan to do now? That wimpy thing doesn't look like it can hurt me. Jiraiya grinned toothily, and for a moment he mirrored Grimjow with an almost psychotic smile. He raised his sword, allowing the acid around him to flow. It shot out at Grimjow in a stream-like form, but it didn't hold that shape for very long. In the middle of its path, the liquid acid suddenly expanded into a size much more reminiscent of a bankai, as if it were a great tidal wave of acid heading towards Grimjow. But Grimjow wouldn't allow Shikamaru's shadow binding to work on him for so long. With great strength, he pulled himself free from the Shurikai's grasp, and in doing so, he nearly uprooted the sword that had been in place conducting the Kido-like special ability. Damn it! Jiraiya-sama. I can't hold him any long, ga. Shikamaru said, before he was struck heavily by one of Grimjow's legs in a fierce kick. He had grabbed his Zanpakuto before he could be drawn into the tidal wave of stomach acid, but in doing so he left himself open to further attacks. Shikamaru. Damn! Jiraiya called, before he called off the tidal wave of acid back toward its normal form before it could engulf the disoriented Shikamaru. The former Konoha Chunin was nimble enough to get back on his feet hastily, but Grimjow was a speed demon, and his agility and reactions were superior to anyone present. I'll do it. Niji said stoically, his kinori gripped tightly in his hands. Like he did with Naruto, he pointed the strange trident at Grimjow, but this time, it wasn't pressed to the Arrancar's neck. Ajikajitsume. The two farthest prongs shot off once again, but Niji put much more Ryatsu into them this time, and they shot off at Grimjow with about the speed of one of his elbow darts. Without even waiting for a hit, Niji was on the move. Like expected, the wild Espada avoided the two prongs, and locked an elbow blade with Niji's three-pronged Zanpakuto as he got near. Come back, Kinori. Niji stated. He planned it to perfection, waiting for the Septima to take his eyes off of the rotating blades that were flying through the air. Like I'd fall for that. Grimjow said, preparing to duck, but when he did, he found he was underneath a shadow once again, unable to move a muscle. For old time's sake, Kage main, successful. Shikamaru said. His blade was planted in the ground once again, but this time it was far closer to Grimjow's position, which meant that the shadow it cast was much stronger. With Grimjow firmly rooted in place, the blades continued their path back to Niji's Zanpakuto, and nothing stopped them from cutting into the bound Arrancar's back on the way there. A small amount of blood leaked out of the wound as Grimjow's arrow softened the damage somewhat, but it didn't change the fact that there were now 2 injuries to the Arrancar's back. You know, Arrancar, it was kinda a drag when I realized my Shirkai a long time ago, and it had basically the same ability I could do while I was alive. But, you see, there's always a different facet to a Shinigami's Zanpakuto. And with that in mind, I learned how to attack using my Shirkai. Shikamaru put his hand on his black Shirkai, allowing another shadow to be cast out of the sword in addition to the one that was binding Grimmjow. This time, however, the shadow retained the shape of a blade, sneaking across the ground towards the captive Arrancar. Damn it! You think your pussy-ass shadows can harm me? You're retarded! Grimmjow roared, before a tidal wave of acid appeared in his blind spot, distracting him at all angles. No, I don't. But, when you're being attacked by all angles, it makes you feel a little bit more vulnerable, doesn't it? Shikamaru asked rhetorically, as both the shadow blade and the acid drew closer. Nice, Shikamaru. Just keep him right there. Jiraiya said, controlling the Toad Symphony with his conductor's baton. Meanwhile, Niji also was not going to be left out of the action. Grimmjow looked around frantically, looking for any options to escape from the 3 Shinigami rapidly closing in on him. Gritting his teeth, his body glowed with a bright blue Ryatsu, before his eyes snapped open. Resurrección, Segunda Etapa, Pantera. What the fuck? Jiraiya called out, shielding his eyes from the torrent of blue Ryatsu that suddenly engulfed them. Shikamaru's shadows were evaporated, and Niji too was blown back by the sheer force of the Ryatsu. A low growl emanated from the spot where Grimmjow stood, and a flash of movement almost impossible to see resounded as the wave of acid crashed down on where Grimmjow once would be. Shikamaru's breath caught in his throat as he felt 4 sharp claws press themselves into his throat, and the growling continued ever louder, right next to his ear. Your fucking shadows won't work anymore. Grimmjow's voice growled. The change in the Arrancar's tone was astounding. Whereas before he was a psychotic, yet obnoxious fighter, here he sounded like a wild animal, growling with every syllable he uttered. Shikamaru's eyes darted around to glimpse at a Grimmjow that was much more animalistic than even his first release, with long, razor-sharp claws on all digits, to the feline mask that covered the bottom half of his face, along with the much bulkier body covered from head to toe in bony armor. His eyes were a deep blue, the iris overtaking all the white sclera that Grimmjow had in his eyes. His hollow hole was enormous. Shikamaru bit his lip, but Grimmjow was not feeling merciful as he punctured the Shinigami with his sharp claws, and Shikamaru wondered just how lame it was to go out like this. But more importantly, the final thing on his mind were the thoughts of pure failure. The last thing he heard were the outraged cries of what was clearly Jiraiya, and then everything went black. Tsunade-sama! Ino shouted above the din, as Tsunade was nearly sliced in half by Neutra's vicious scythes. The woman had no offensive capabilities within the Shirkai of her Zanpakuto, and as such, she was completely reliant on her teammates to do the fighting for her. Come on! Come on! Come on! Come on! Come on! Neutra shouted, swinging his blades frantically at Tsunade, who was doing her best to dodge every single one. Kiba got between the two of them, clanging his Zanpakuto against Neutra's sides, with Tsunade's healing plant still sticking out of his back. A high-pitched buzzing sound rained through the air once again, and Neutra felt his head spin. Rin had clattered her tuning fork against the ground, creating her deadly special effect upon Neutra. The only problem was, Ino was affected next to her. Ow, watch it, Rin-san! Ino groused, sticking a finger in her ear and twisting. Rin had the decency to look sheepish enough, but that was all shattered when Neutra decided to turn his attention on her instead. Arg! So many annoying abilities. I don't even know who to kill first, he rumbled. Rin was prepared to block his next strike, but the Sexta Espada pulled an unpredictable move at the last second, and went for the Shinigami no one was prepared for, Ino. Ino shrieked as the Arrancar swarmed at her in his slow, by Espada standard speed. She had drawn her Zanpakuto, but Kiba and Rin supported by Tsunade had done all the fighting up to this point. She hadn't even released her Shirkai. The espada may have been slow compared to his comrades, but his speed was more than capable of keeping up with the Shuinpa challenged Ino, and it was already too late for her. Her right arm was lopped off by the foremost of Neutra's sides, with Tsunade's Shirkai power not being strong enough to regenerate entire limbs. Ino screamed in agony as she flopped to the floor, blood pouring from the stump where her arm once was. Neutra didn't stop there, leveling another scythe to pierce through the downed Ino completely. He swung two of his scythes at the same time, but in a directly coordinated attack, Rin and Kiba both blocked one of the scythes, almost being overpowered at the same time. It seemed to the Shinigami that Neutra's shtick was almost used up, and he had no other tricks up his sleeve. However, when two more arms sprouted out of nowhere and impaled the two of them, they realized that they couldn't have been more wrong. Tsunade's healing magic was already working, but the sudden injuries had left Neutra wide open to further attack either to them or to Ino. While both Rin and Kiba were downed, Neutra used the opportunity to produce two more scythes from holes on his wrists, bringing the total up to a staggering 6 scythes. Tsunade grimaced. She had had enough of standing on the sidelines. Everyone, don't try to match him physically. Keep your distance and don't use close quarters combat. Hold back and use Kido. Tsunade snarled at Rin and Kiba. Yes, ma'am. I'm not really good with Kido, though. You bitches. What are you planning now? Neutra asked. As an answer, Tsunade didn't respond to him, but instead exited her safe haven of plants to join into the fray. I'll go first. I'm the strongest with Kido and will try to pin him down and damage him. The rest of you try to follow my lead with complementary Kido spells. Rin, you're the most proficient here in Hada's spells, so after my Bakudo. Tsunade trailed off. I've got it, Tsunade-sama. Okay, he's slow, but he needs to be motionless. I'm going first. Tsunade called. Bakudo number 75, Gochuteken. Tsunade slammed her palms into the stone ground before her as her fingertips glowed with a sacred yellow light. Neutra turned towards her prepared for a fight, but was not ready when 5 strong steel pillars fell straight from the sky. 2 of them clipped his legs as he fell to the ground, and another one pinned down his right half of arms. Curiously, the final 2 pillars missed completely, and he was able to lay there with just half his body pinned. Shit! Neutra screamed, but as he wiggled his left half of arms, Tsunade knew that he wasn't completely restrained. And now, for a barrier. Bakudo number 81, Danku. Tsunade cast another Bakudo spell directly after her first one, placing 3 invisible barrier walls around Neutra. Even if he broke out, his attacks would be repelled by the barriers, and they would remain unharmed. The only opening was for Rin to fire into. I'm on it, Tsunade-sama. Hada number 63, Raikoho. Rin's palms crackled with electrical energy, and she stepped forth to fire the lightning-based Kido into the opening left. Neutra grimaced as he broke free from the Kido with his physical strength, but the double layer of Bakudo was there just as a foolproof to his strength. As he tried to exit, he was blasted by the lightning and propelled backwards, hitting the Danku barrier opposite him. I'm not done. Seeping crest of turbidity. Arrogant vessel of lunacy. Boil forth and deny. Grow numb and flicker. Disrupt sleep. Crawling queen of iron. Eternally self-destructing doll of mud. Unite. Repulse. Fill with soil and know your own powerlessness. Hada number 90, Kurohitsuji. What? Black coffin? That's a level 90 spell. Kiba called out, looking at Rin in amazement as the purple-black coffin of energy surrounded the dust and smoke-filled area where Neutra once stood. Yeah, but it's only at half power. It's my best spell, but I can't get the full thing even when reciting the incantation. But, with all this Kido, hopefully it's enough. The energy of the black coffin whirred for a moment, and Rin held her breath as the other Bakudo seemed to hold strong, with the destructive Kido engulfing the Sexta Espada. No, he's not dead yet. I can feel it. Tsunade groused. Rin stared at the former Hokage in surprise, before the base of the Kurohitsuji seemed to distort and falter. Resurrección, Segunda Etapa, Santa Teresa. The Kurohitsuji was sliced into multiple fragments, the strong Ryatsu in the air giving strength to the blades that cut them apart. The surrounding Danku were shattered. What the hell? Kiba cried out, as the iron pillars from the other Bakudo were cast down. The Ryatsu being emitted was heavier than anyone else's currently present, and it shone through with an intense amount of bloodlust. A scythe darted out of the cloud of dust and Ryatsu, heading straight for Rin. The girl yelped and dodged, before she noticed that the injured Ino was directly in the way of the scythe. Grimacing, she shoved Ino out of the way with her body, taking the thick end of the scythe directly in the right shoulder. Rin-san! Both Ino and Kiba cried. Rin flopped to the ground just like Ino had not too long ago, but she clearly wasn't dead yet. She scrambled to her feet, clutching her wound as Tsunade's healing Zanpakuto began to work its magic. That shit again. Noitra's voice rang out. It's the only thing keeping all of you alive. The rest of the Kido shattered into small bits as Tsunade grimaced. The Kido had not been effective after all, and with the change in Ryatsu, it was clear that their opponent had gotten even stronger. TCH, one thing I don't like about this form is that it lessens the number of arms I have. But then again, Noitra said as he stepped out into the fray. True to his word, the Sexto was down to 2 arms now, but he didn't look any less dangerous. His sides had been relocated to the bottom side of his wrists, jutting out from 2 holes in the hollow armor to create a vicious curved blade nearly 4 feet in length. The scythe was pure silver except for the very thin blade portion, which was covered in a sharp-looking black substance. Noitra grinned as he stepped out, revealing serrated, razor-like fangs. His horns were curved downwards to flank his face, with his hollow mask portion as a set of goggles, one covering his single eye and the other covering his whole. He sliced his blades against one another, grinning at the group. His body is much more streamlined. He doesn't look quite as... Rin thought, but she was forced to turn elsewhere, as Noitra appeared directly behind her with a blade poised at her throat. Slow, she finished her thought, before she had one scythe poised at her neck, waiting for the kill. Fear entered the woman's eyes, and she knew that a fatal blow to a vital organ was not something that Tsunade's Shirkai could just heal off. I fucked around for way too long. You bitches have gotten on my nerves, this isn't even fun anymore. Noitra growled. Die! Rin! Rin attempted to move, but her comrades could only watch in horror as Noitra plunged his weapon into Rin's neck, slicing her jugular to pieces as a torrent of blood splattered the dying woman's body. She let out a cry of fear and despair, shakily putting her hands to her face before silently collapsing into the dirt. The vine in her back slowly detached itself. It had been a clean kill, something that was rare with the likes of Noitra. Alright, who's next? Noitra sneered at the rest of them. Tsunade was seething. As a healer, she had allowed the ultimate failure to occur under her watch. Bankai! The battlefield was silent for just a moment, as green rain fell from the heavens. Everyone on the upper level, from the Konoha Association to the remaining Espada halted, putting their hands out to catch the bizarre rain which they quickly determined wasn't rain, but Ryuryoku. What the hell? Minato cried, near the end of the bridge. Ah, shit! He went and did it, huh? That bastard Ulquiorra! Grimmjow noted, pausing in his fight. Back at the entrance to the Greater Palace, Ichigo was impressed. Even with the hollow mask, Ichigo could not help but whistle. What a pretty show. I saw that number on your chest, I guess you've been promoted for a reason, huh? In all honesty, I came here expecting something like that, but... He trailed off, as Ulquiorra unfurled big black wings, showing off the new bat-eared helmet that he was sporting, along with the form-fitting wardrobe. The one who attacks first wins. Ichigo called, placing both hands on her Zanpakuto and swinging with all his might at Ulquiorra. The bat hollow didn't flinch, and opted to instead produce the Luz de la Luna from the palm of his hand. He met Ichigo's blade with the lance, and Ichigo grunted underneath the pressure. He didn't know yet if Ulquiorra was faster than him or not, but his superior reflexes didn't help him determine that. Ulquiorra flapped his large wings, putting some distance between Ichigo and himself, while the Shinigami pressed the attack. He placed his blade up to his shoulder, looking down it as if it were a sight, and thrust forward with a stabbing motion. Ulquiorra avoided 6 or 7 quick stabs from Ichigo's Zanpakuto that were attempting to impale him straight through the head, before Ichigo changed tactics and raised his Zanpakuto over his head. Getsuga Tensho. The wave of black and red Ryatsu slammed down onto the stone bridge and Ulquiorra flapped his wings, putting himself in the air to meet Ichigo with the Luz de la Luna. Getsuga Tensho. Ichigo whispered, creating the much more concentrated version of it on the tip of his blade. That again. Ulquiorra thought, kicking his legs out. Ichigo released the Zanpakuto, but as soon as it was released fully, he was on the offensive once again, leaping into his own energy technique and slashing at Ulquiorra, who was busy trying to keep himself out of harm's way from the Getsuga. You can keep up with me in my first release. Perhaps you have gained some slight strength in Huecomundo. Ulquiorra commented, batting Ichigo's Zanpakuto to the side with his lance and breaking his stance. Ichigo wasn't done, however. With a quick flick of his wrist, he thrust his free hand out. Ulquiorra's eyes widened ever so slightly as red energy coalesced in the palm of Ichigo's hand. Zero? Ulquiorra wondered. Did you think I would spend so much time in Huecomundo in this state, and not pick up on a few hollow tricks? Ichigo asked rhetorically, firing the ray of red light point blank at Ulquiorra. Ulquiorra had to admit, it was a well put together Zero. After seeing so many of them, he would know what constituted a good Zero. Yet, a Shinigami couldn't learn Zero, even if they spent a decade trapped within Huecomundo. This would injure him slightly, but it was the best course of action to avoid the hollowified Shinigami's Zero. A black right hand shot out and grasped the beam as if it were a baseball, and Ulquiorra blocked the energy with his palms while moving it dangerously close to Ichigo's face. Ichigo dodged to the side with quick reflexes, but the Zero still clipped the side of his face and broke off part of his mask, revealing his right eye to the world. He glared at Ulquiorra, who diverted the Zero away from anywhere it would harm the Segunda. Nevertheless, he had seared his hands. That mask, what would happen if it were to disappear completely? Ulquiorra asked. Ichigo's eyes seemed to snap open at that, and he placed a hand over his face, recovering the portion of the mask that had been broken. Not a chance. With those words spoken, Ichigo once again jumped back into the fray, swinging with a flurry of wild yet controlled slashes, followed by a quick Getsuga Tensho heavily powered up by his mask. I see. You fight like a true hollow, far less restrained than a normal Shinigami. But... Ulquiorra unleashed his true Sonido, crouching down nary an inch in front of Ichigo as the Shinigami prepared to strike with his sword yet again. He lifted his head up, staring coolly into Ichigo's blackened eyes. You lack the fire. I would know. I've lacked it for centuries. Ulquiorra continued to look straight into Ichigo's eyes, before he flashed a finger straight in front of him. Ichigo swung his sword again, and Ulquiorra retracted his finger, shaking his head as he did so. It wouldn't work at close quarters. His energy lance whirred within his hands. Tell me, Kurosaki Ichigo, do you know that there are many specialized forms of Zero in addition to the one used by all hollows? Ulquiorra asked casually. The masked visage of Ichigo stared back at him blankly, indicating no knowledge of the situation. I myself use a specialized form of Zero, one whose power truly indicates the strength of the Espada. Ichigo tentatively held his ground. The Zero sounded like bad news, but Ichigo was suddenly alerted to a much more pressing issue as he felt a deep rumbling that shook him to the core. Wah! Ulquiorra was no longer paying attention to him, instead staring off to the sky and up at the palace, where his superior was making plans. I see. He has begun. We have lost many of our number, but the Soul King has fallen into our grasp. Everything as you know it is about to come to an end. At that moment, Ichigo did something that Ulquiorra considered surprising. In the heat of battle, he waved his hand across his face and took the hollow mask off, reverting him back to his less powerful state. The Soul King. I think it's been pretty obvious that you were after the Soul King all this time, Ichigo said, his eyes glancing down at the battlefield below, and the millions of hollows desperately attempting to kill just 5 people. But, why? Do you wish to kill him? What could you, as hollows, possibly gain from that? Ichigo questioned, even as Ulquiorra slammed his lance into his black blade once again. His mask was back up. You wouldn't know, but we do. What can be gained from this, what Naruto can gain from this, is beyond your wildest imagination. We aim to turn the world on its axis. Ulquiorra said cryptically. What does that mean? You want to change the world? Naruto wants to change the world? Ichigo asked. His face twisted up at the last thought, and he almost spat out Naruto's name. Correct, but I can assure you that you have no idea what that means. With that guy leading all of you, I can't imagine it's anything good. What are you planning? You've invaded Soul Society, killed countless Shinigami, are after the Soul King, and you're still not satisfied. There is no point in telling this to me. I'm not the one who created this plan, and every moment you spend talking, you allow Naruto to get one step closer to his goal. But I suppose you would prefer to wax philosophical with me in the meantime, Ulquiorra deadpanned, even as he readied his Luz de la Luna once again. But since we're already talking, did you know that we once tried to see if you were worthy to join our cause? Ulquiorra asked. Ichigo barked out a laugh. Me? Join you? That's a fucking good one. That hollow form of yours is very interesting. It could have been a huge asset to our commitment, but Naruto seemed to see otherwise in the end. He thought you were too much of a nuisance to remain in our good graces. And yet, that power. He trailed off. I don't think I've seen the full extent, he finished. That mask of yours, it can't be all there is to your powers. Ulquiorra charged up a black blip of light in his index finger, forcing Ichigo to look at his palm. This is my fully powered Zero that I can only use within my released state. Zero Oscurus. Can your mask withstand something like this? Ulquiorra inquired. Ichigo seemed to lose his cool slightly, seeing the Ryatsu increase and the Zero grow in power. What the hell is that? Ichigo asked, putting his sword up for protection. But it was already too late, as the Segunda released the Dark Zero from his fingertip. A sound like a heavy crash resounded on the bridge, thundering towards Ichigo. The Shinigami winced as the dark energy overtook him, but Ichigo had been in many a situation up to this point. He flexed both his hands across his chest, making a motion as if he was ripping something into two. He thrust his chest out as new white material covered the portion of his body from where his shoulders started to his chest, and he grimaced deeper as the Zero hit him. However, Ichigo's defenses were superior at this point, as the Zero crashed into an explosion directly behind Ichigo and damaging the somewhat fragile bridge even more. Ulquiorra's eyes snapped open as he viewed the moderately injured Ichigo, who was panting heavily, the plate on his chest still easily intact. No way, that was an Arrancar arrow, and from the looks of it, it's a Spada level in its toughness. Ichigo panted some more, but he seemed vaguely happy. What a crazy technique, Ulquiorra. But it didn't work, even if you made me drag out more power. And now, he panted, grinning deviously at Ulquiorra. It's my turn, he said, as more hollow mask materialized over his body. This time, it covered his entire torso. The mask was starting to morph out of control by now, and he was getting closer and closer to the perfect form. The energy surrounding him is pure. Like nothing I have ever seen. Naruto thought as he stared down the Soul King, surrounded by his 2 retainers. Their hoods were up, but they carried no weapons. Naruto could not see their faces. Who are you? The Soul King spoke, his voice misty and echoic, yet with a very old and tired quality to it. He did not stand upon the ground, but rather levitated directly above the floor. My name is unimportant, oh, great soul King Sama. But, I will be able to present you with a name that you may be able to recognize as more important. Do you remember the hollow Reporo? Naruto asked. If there was a chance for any emotion to be shown within those strange eyes, that moment would be the perfect opportunity. No. I see. The hollow of legend. Reporo. That means, you have come for me, haven't you? You plan to continue what that hollow so desperately sought. Take what I have from me. Naruto produced El Libro de Ciclos from within his robe, opening to a specific page. Reporo documented all his travels within Soul Society, down to every last detail of the invasion. To pass down this information, he wrote what purpose you played above just ruling the Soul Society. A government figurehead such as yourself would not warrant so much protection, along with your own pocket dimension. Your alternative purpose is the true reason for these precautions, and your own subordinates, no matter how long they served or how much they know you, cannot find out. Naruto took a step forward, but as he did, a low-level Kido spell zapped the ground right before him, making the Primera frown and freeze in his tracks. Halt! Not a step closer to His Majesty. Naruto glared at the offender who cut off his monologue. It was the hooded retainer who was on the right, who had apparently fired the Kido at him. Not a step closer, Uzumaki Naruto. He growled. Naruto's eyes snapped open, and Sakura to his right came to a realization as she recognized the voice. The retainer on the right removed his hood. What the shit? Naruto growled, looking at the retainer's face. It was like an homage to himself if he were ever drafted into the Shinigami. The young man who looked about 21 in human years stared back. Spiky, blonde hair, though not quite as spiky as his, with eyes reminiscent of his former blue color. Since he hadn't aged a day since he died, the one in front of him looked like a slightly more aged version of him that was lacking the signature hollow features. Do you see this, Akane? He asked, addressing the retainer on the left, who remained silent. You! Shit, you look a lot like me now that I think about it. It's a little bit too creepy, to be honest. I don't, what? He trailed off, before a thought struck him. Wait, don't tell me. They had another kid when they arrived here, didn't they? The Shinigami in front of Naruto smiled, an obnoxious smile that no doubt reminded Naruto of his old self. The name's Taiki, son of Uzumaki Kushina and Namikaze Minato. I suppose you could say I'm your brother, but at this point, I don't really know if we could call ourselves related anymore. He said. To his surprise, Naruto began to laugh. Oh, man. This is just beautiful. I suppose killing just parents at this point wouldn't be very satisfying when I could kill both them along with a little brother. Taiki grimaced. I don't think you're understanding me right now. Someone's going to be killed, but it sure as hell ain't me. He guffawed. His zanpakuto laid at his hip, and Naruto wondered how he hadn't noticed it yet. Speaking of which, there's been something else on my mind, Taiki said, looking at Sakura with all traces of humor gone from his face. I never thought our newest recruit would be so keen on helping hollows. We know it was you, Sakura. He glared at her. Sakura glared. What are you two doing here? You should be down there fighting the endless mass of hollows. Well, we were, for a while. I was occupied with those guys for a long time. Even if they were at a very low level, there were just so many of them. Eventually though, we got the okay from our teammates that they could handle things on their own. It was our job to head back to the palace and protect the Soul King. He said, staring at the silent monarch. He had been allowing his retainers to speak to the Arrancar threat, and showed no emotion at the thought of a betrayal from within. Stop making idle chit-chat with these scum, Taiki. We are wasting precious time here. The retainer on the other side spoke, in a harsh female voice. She pulled off her hood, showing a woman of similar age to Taiki, with long, flaming red hair. Naruto looked upon her as well, and growled. Oh, yeah. Mom and Dad had 2 kids while they were here. It's really a shame, we were looking forward to meeting you, but what a great mess this has turned out to be, Taiki said casually, looking at his older brother. Akane was busy glaring at Naruto with hate. Uzumaki Naruto, you are a disgrace. Mom and Dad spend years, centuries searching for you, only to come up with nothing. And you have basically spit in their faces with what you are doing, in addition to being out for their lives. They might have mercy upon seeing you, but do not think I am the same way. I will end your life and now, and will work with them to get over your memory. Naruto's sister said, her own Zanpakuto at her hip. 1, 2, 3, 4 family members to kill. Naruto growled happily. That motherfucker Minato is still the top priority, but I guess he never told you about me, did he? And what he did? What? He told us about you alright. What you did within the village of Konoha, growing up with the power of the Kyuubi, and working to gain the respect of the village. I'm kinda envious, to be honest. Taiki said. That did it. Envious? You're envious of me? That's too funny. You spoiled Shinigami kids wouldn't even last a day going through what I did back in Konoha. That smelly shithole got what was coming to it, and if there's one thing I regret, it's not seeing the look of the despair on Namake's, Minato's stupid face. He guffawed. Enough of your disgusting prattle. Akane said. Naruto. These 2 are members of the Royal Guard. Sakura said. She was going to stay out of this one. So, we gotta do it, then? I guess so, it will be fun. But first, there's a really big item on my agenda I need to take care of. He said, flashing away using Sonido, catching both Akane and Taiki off guard. He's fast. Akane gasped, whipping out her Zanpakuto as Naruto appeared directly on top of them, grabbing the stoic Soul King on his face and pushing him away while avoiding 2 quick swings coming from his siblings. What the? Taiki wondered, as Naruto was already over at the spire machine that rose out of the chamber. The 2 siblings of the Royal Guard didn't even know what it was for, but the Soul King definitely did. Wait. He started, but Naruto shoved his face into the metal of the machine. Surprisingly, it didn't look like he was injured by the blow in the slightest. No, I will not wait. Not anymore. You know what this machine does, it's your true calling. Without you and your power, this machine cannot operate. And I plan to do it. What is he talking about, Spirit King-sama? Akane asked. You know, I've kinda wondered what kind of leader keeps such huge secrets from his strongest followers. But then again, it's not like you actually do any leading, you powerless figurehead. Naruto roared, slamming the king's head into the metal once again. This machine is. Stay back, you 2. Don't put yourselves in harm's way. The Spirit King began, and the 2 members of the Royal Guard looked at him dumbly, even as they were about to jump into action. If you want to know so badly, I'll be the one to tell you. Naruto grinned, whipping out El Libro de Ciclos and turning to a certain page. His posture and expression was unusually subdued as he thumbed through the words to find a certain passage. The legendary Hollow has seen so much shit. He mused. But this is the greatest discovery of all. Basically, this particular chapter gives the book its namesake. He mused, before he cleared his throat. Alright, so everyone knows that the world we live in is split into 3 separate dimensions, correct? The Soul Society, which governs the afterlife and governs the souls that were both born here and the souls of past humans. The human world, the realm of the living. And Hueco Mundo, the world of the hollows. Each of these 3 realms are completely separate dimensions that have very limited interaction with each other, at least by today's standards. He trailed off. Akane and Taiki were puzzled, but their swords were still at the ready. This knowledge is limited to the Soul King and Hollow Legend Reporo. No one else knows the true history of this world. Did you know that at one time, long ago, the lines were much more blurred? A stone dropped into Taiki's and Akane's gut. They both had a bad feeling about this. They trembled when Naruto's grip on the Soul King tightened, but they didn't move, remembering the king's orders. 4,000 years ago, there were no lines between the dimensions. Or, to be more accurate, there were no distinctions. Everyone was in one place, and they could all interact with each other. Nowadays, hollows can pretty much come and go from the human world as they please, but they didn't have their own dimension back then, and neither did the Shinigami. He paused. Basically, what the world amounts to is souls having no home to call their own, so the eventual hollification process would be inevitable. Naturally, there were a few souls that developed special powers, and as Shinigami, they were the opposite of hollows, and as such able to resist becoming one. But they were getting overwhelmed, because nearly every human ended up as a hollow, and the cycle continued. These proto-Shinigami banded together to find a way to end this pointless charade, and eventually they found a way. One being at the top stood at the top of the proto-Shinigami, with powers on a cosmic scale that the world has not seen before or since. Though he had no patience or ability for fighting, this being could end all their problems. Do you know who that being might have been? Naruto asked, but his eyes automatically panned to the Soul King. Akane and Taiki were at a loss for words now, and they normally spunky sibling duo were being floored by Naruto. This individual, who is now known as the Soul King, had the unique power of what is known as spatial Ryatsu, but he needed a way to channel his power. So the ancient Shinigami built this. Naruto banged his hand against the complex machine. With it, he could channel his power of space in order to do one particular thing: split the world. He finished. What? Split the world? That thing. Taiki trailed off. With his power as its source, the machine warped space into two very separate, yet very habitable dimensions. The first one was where the hollows were banished to, though we have since found our way back. The second was the Soul Society, a place where the newly crowned Soul King gathered up his followers to create a sort of homeland. The Proto-Shinigami began ferrying the souls of dead humans to the newly created dimension, in order to prevent hollows from spreading. The royal palace was also carved out using the machine, and the Soul King disappeared into his own special world, never to be seen again by the Soul Society. Yet, he still existed from the shadows as an omnipresent presence. That's where Reporo comes in. The king of Huecamundo found out about the machine during his legendary invasion of Soul Society. When he was defeated and returned to Huecamundo, he catalogued everything he knew. When I found it, I knew there was interesting feature about it. I don't like where this is going, Akane said. The machine has a failsafe, and the Soul King must be present to operate it. With that in mind, it is possible to do the unthinkable, reverse the process and reform the dimensions into one. The siblings thought they could have heard a pin drop. But if it does what it says it does, that's what you're after, Akane screamed, before Sakura took action. With a quick shuinpa, she sped over to Naruto's position, producing a Pakage. Duh! I hate the Shinigami. Soul Society is a fucking cum stain. Put it back the way it was. No more Konso, no more halting the process of hollification by taking humans here, and no more Soul Society. Naruto clicked open the interface, showing a complicated array of knobs and buttons. Going back to his guide, he flipped a switch while pressed 3 buttons in a specific order, and the machine roared to life. A ray of energy shot out of the end of the spire, going through the hole in the ceiling. The soul stream, the thread of dimensions, but it's not ready. The first ingredient to split apart that Naruto roared, grabbing the Soul King and throwing at the now glowing machine. He didn't say a word, like he was resigning his fate. I'm tired of ruling over this place, he thought. As he was thrown into the soul stream, he was vaporized immediately, and Akane and Taiki gasped. Yet, the Soul King's powerful Ryatsu lingered, and was added to the soul stream as it grew. It was piercing the sky at this point. First, the keys, Naruto shouted, pulling out the 13 keys he received from Soul Society's captains. True to his word, There were 13 slots on the face of the machine, each numbered with the kanji for each division. He put them all in each slot, listening as the machine whirred. "We still need 3 more things," Naruto cried. As if on cue, Sakura handed him the pakage. He unwrapped it, showing a vial of what seemed to be a black goopy liquid. "Concentrated, hollow erasure. Is this how you wiped out those Quincy's?" Sakura grinned. "Yep. You'd probably know that the very being of hollows is practically poison to a Quincy. I slipped a whole bunch of that stuff into their medical supplies and food, and also picked up this," she said, passing him a vial of bluish liquid. "We need 3 more things. Some form of erasure from a human, a Shinigami, and a hollow. One of the dominant race of each dimension to bind them together. This one. Quincy's are humans as well. I won't let you. We've been sitting around for far too long." Akane roared, and with a quick shuanpa she crashed her Zanpakuto into Naruto, nearly splitting the floor in 2. The machine had not been damaged. It would have killed him if Naruto hadn't blocked the strike with his own Zanpakuto. Simultaneously, he uncorked the vials and tossed them with abandon into the soul stream, watching as the ooze mixed in, and the hole in the sky got larger. He pushed off, causing Akane to skid back. "All that remains is," he said, as if he were never attacked, "the Shinigami. They're everywhere. I've even got 2 fine ones right in front of me, but seeing as she's already fulfilled her purpose." Sakura grinned at Naruto when he added the 2 mixtures to the soul stream, but her smile quickly faded when she saw how Naruto was looking at her, and even she couldn't help but be alarmed as Naruto acted, pushing her directly into the machine. Bankai. Rin-ni. Tsunade's Shurikai was fully a support technique, one designed to keep her teammates alive on the battlefield. Her Bankai, on the other hand, was when Tsunade finally learned how to attack with her Zanpakuto, and no longer was she reliant on Hado's spells to cause any damage. "Tsunade-sama!" Ino cried out, as the vines from before retracted from her body. "Stand back, you two. I'll handle this one alone," she said dangerously, as her Bankai began to take shape. The vines retreated back into her sword, before the blade itself disappeared. A green plant like a Venus flytrap sprouted underneath her feet, rising 10 feet in the air and acting as a sort of platform that Tsunade stood on. No less than 7 long vines, covered in thorns, sprouted from the edge of the bulb. They lashed around like whips, dripping with a full-looking black ichor from their thorns. "It's just you and me now, eh? At least you've finally taken out something impressive other than your pussy shit. Are we gonna start this thing or what?" Neutra asked. "But, now that I look at you a little closer, you got a nice rack. Too bad I'm a hollow, but seeing a rack like that makes me feel a little bit excited. Even if you are a useless woman." Neutra hissed. Tsunade glared at him, and clenched her fist, her old temper flaring up. Yet, she couldn't punch this sack of shit considering she didn't have insane strength anymore. Her Bankai was going to be doing all the fighting. This one wasn't like Jiraiya, who was just your average, everyday, super pervert. This one made off-color sexist and perverted comments for the purpose of being malicious, and it bugged her. Tsunade shot out her hand, summoning one of the vines to her aid. It cracked in the air, shooting out towards Neutra. Now that he had actually had a decent sonido, it was easy for him to avoid it. "This is mine!" Neutra shouted, slicing off the tendril at its base as he got close. The same filthy black ichor splattered from inside the vine as he sliced it, covering Neutra in some small flecks of the substance. "Ugh, this isn't so sexy, after all," he growled in disgust. He didn't even bother wiping off the ichor, but he was slightly surprised when the vine grew back, giving Tsunade's Bankai an even 7 once again. "Tsunade-sama, be careful where you're swinging your Bankai around. Some of that black stuff almost landed over here." Ino cried from over a distance away. Tsunade ignored her. Neutra clanged his blades together once again, but Tsunade's Bankai was now beginning to move. It picked itself up off the ground and walked over to him as if the vines were legs, but luckily for him it wasn't very fast. "Da fuck? That thing's mobile too," he growled, jumping out of the way of a vine that impacted the ground and slicing the thing off. Once again, filthy black ichor spewed forth, but this time none of it landed on Neutra. Tsunade wasn't going to give him much of a chance to recover, as all of a sudden the 7 vines began twirling around the base of a plant in a swirling vortex, even as the animated plant began to move. "So, that thing can spin too? Too bad you're still a weak-ass bitch who won't even fight me herself." Neutra sneered, pointing his 2 blades together as he glowed with golden Ryatsu. "Assassino!" A short chain was visible, connecting the 2 blades to the small holes in Neutra's wrists. With a grunt, he hefted the connected blades outward, throwing it at Tsunade's bankai. They spiraled through the air, glowing with Ryatsu, and Tsunade got the impression that the Ryatsu added nearly 2 feet of reach onto those things. Like a puppet master, Neutra crossed the 2 flying blades together, before he jerked the right blade around the bankai, lopping off several of the spinning vines, while he controlled the left one to attack the middle. The blade cut through the plant matter as if it were a knife through butter, cutting Tsunade's bankai almost cleanly in half. The top platform that Tsunade was resting upon shot into the air, but it was still connected by a few plant fibers to the bottom. A wave of black ichor was spilling out, leaving a puddle near the base of the bankai. "Ack! Split apart, Rineni!" Tsunade shouted, as the base of the plant completely detached itself from the upper portion, allowing Tsunade to levitate in the air with her Ryatsu alone. The 7 vines continued to stay at the base of the bankai, but several more were sprouting from the levitating end that Tsunade was currently perched on. Neutra's twin sides pulled back toward him promptly after they were finished cutting the plant into ribbons. And yet, he was getting very annoyed because it seemed like Tsunade had actually entered another, stronger state of her bankai after he had cut it. He blocked a quick strike from Tsunade's bankai, before he disappeared with a quick sonido. "Tsunade-sama, watch out!" Kiba called from over where he and Ino were standing. Tsunade's eyes snapped open as the Sexta Espada appeared in midair, with 2 sides ready to close in and cut her in half. Tsunade raised her hand calmly when she saw Neutra coming at her, erecting a barrier of vines dripping with the same sticky black ichor to protect herself from Neutra's attacks. The Sexta could still see her though. The barrier was made of a strangely translucent plant material, and the Arankar saw how small vines connected to Tsunade's face and body, as if they were strange parasites. With reckless abandon, Neutra struck the barrier with the blades anyway, growling as the right one got stuck in the plant matter. The black ichor leaked out and acted like a sort of superglue, and Neutra found he couldn't pull himself out. "I wouldn't struggle. That substance could bind the strongest Menos Grande." Ino shouted in triumph over to the side. Neutra glared at her, taking his free and throwing his blade at her. "Shut your hole, you stupid cunt," he roared, getting an intense satisfaction when both she and Kiba and screamed and moved just barely out of harm's way. He turned his attention back to Tsunade, who was muttering something under her breath, when he noticed that the plant was threatening to pull him in and consume him. The plant was already finished covering Tsunade, but she obviously wouldn't be harmed by her own bankai. She was still mumbling to herself underneath the cover of plants, but when her eyes snapped open, Neutra could actually hear her speak clearly at him. "Tsuru." Multiple vein-like vines spread out from where Tsunade was standing, digging underneath the plant barrier and beginning to grow over to where Neutra was. Like Neutra's sides, they were glowing with Ryatsu and the black ichor that seemed to be so common with Tsunade's bankai. Yet, with the vines wrapped around him, it didn't matter how strong his iero was. The black ichor was sticky, and he would be bound in place as if the strongest Bakudo in the world was being used on him. "Fuck!" Neutra shouted, using his free arm to grasp his shoulder. With a wince of pain and some aggravation, the Sexta detached his right arm at the shoulder, allowing the creeping vines to take control of it. Now freed from the bankai, Neutra put distance between himself and Tsunade, hovering in midair while Tsunade glared up at him. He concentrated, allowing his Ryatsu to work toward regenerating his lost limb. It snapped back into place after just a few seconds. After his arm recovered, he released his blades from their connections at his wrists, opting to hold them in his hands, giving him an extended reach without him throwing them. He opened his mouth, showing his tongue with the 6 tattoo plastered all over it. He charged up a golden Siro, stronger than his usual one, in an attempt to break clean through the barrier. Need more. Tsunade grimaced, trying to bring up her plant barrier to maximum strength to avoid the Siro. The yellow energy was upon her far too quickly, however, and she ripped through the Bankai and abandoned it as the golden Siro eliminated all of her defenses and left the tip of her Bankai a smoldering husk. Neutra was already upon her as soon as her defenses were gone, and she was in midair as an easy target, swinging his sides down upon her. As a last-ditch effort, she summoned a vine and fashioned it as a type of blade, but it was cut through easily. However, it gave her enough time to avoid the strike and land on the ground, allowing her to rethink a new strategy. She touched down upon the ground, the remnants of her Bankai healing themselves slowly. She would be unable to use it for the time being, so she would have to hold off Neutra with little more than the scraps of it while it healed. She gathered another vine and held it like a sword, while Neutra crossed his blades once again. Assassino! He crossed the blades again, connecting them once again to his wrists as he threw them like a boomerang. Now that Tsunade was on the ground and not protected, she was a much easier target. Tsunade stared at the incoming blades, and then at her plant sword, realizing that such a flimsy weapon would never be able to get through those scythes of Neutris. Thinking quickly, she filed through her knowledge of Kido to find a barrier spell strong enough to block it, but it was too late. Fortunately for her, Ino and Kiba had found the moment a perfect time to act, and they had rushed in as soon as they saw Tsunade's Bankai fail. Ino's sealed Zanpakuto met Neutra's left scythe, while Kiba's Shurikai met his right one. Neutra seemed to simply view the two of them as little more than a distraction. They all knew that they were there just to give Tsunade some time. Out of my way! Neutra snarled, pushing both Shinigami with his sides, preparing to cut into them while they were disoriented. Now, Tsunade-sama! Ino shouted. Use your Kido on him. Tsunade snapped out of her funk when Ino and Kiba acted on their own, but their strategy wasn't a very sound one. Are you crazy? You're in the way. If I use my Kido now, you'll be engulfed in it. We'll handle it. Just use it. Tsunade growled. Alright, but don't blame me if something goes wrong. With Kiba and Ino holding down Neutra, Tsunade was free to charge up her Kido. Hadin number 88, Hiryu Gekizoku Shinten Raiho. What the? Fuck. With Neutra's eyes still trained on both Ino and Kiba, he was slow to react when Tsunade fired an intense blast of blue lightning directly in his path. At this rate, it would engulf all three of them. Damn it. Not stupid Kido again. I'm not gonna fall for it this time. Neutra growled. Punalada, he roared, throwing his right Zanpakuto out. Ino and Kiba had planned to hold him till the last possible moment, then disappear with a quick Shuinpa. Ino disappeared in time to get away, but Neutra had thrown his chained scythe Kiba's way, pulling it tight so it would wrap around him and prevent him from using Shuinpa. Like a lasso holding a bull, Neutra pulled back, wrapping his lanky arms around Kiba and pressing the Shinigamis back to him as the strong Kido approached. The strongest Iero and a meat shield. I think I'm going to survive this. Neutra snickered, his strength more than capable of keeping the struggling Kiba down. The blue lightning veered close to the two of them, with Kiba screaming and Neutra snickering his repulsive laugh. Tsunade-sama, wait! Ino called out, when she realized that Kiba hadn't gotten out. Damn it! It's too late! Tsunade yelled over the chaos. The Kido had already been fired. Neutra ducked as he felt the Kido impact him. It was a moderate burning sensation, but Iero was holding true, and the meat shield in front of him was absorbing much of the contact. On the other hand, Kiba did not have anything capable of defending against a high 80s Kido when being held down. The lightning seared his flesh like it was paper, and when the Kido subsided after nearly 5 seconds, he was charred and burned. Neutra dropped him like trash, watching as he struggled on the ground. Without even looking at the others, before Tsunade and Ino could even react, he retracted his wrist scythe and jabbed it directly into the top of his forehead, scalping him without a thought. Neutra then kicked the dead Kiba forward, watching the others' look of disgust as he landed directly in front of them. Nothing would be able to heal that. Fucking kid thought he was cool enough to distract me. Got what was coming to him. Neutra sneered, while Ino and Tsunade seethed with rage. Neutra was done playing around at this point, now focusing his attention on killing Tsunade. He rattled his blades. And you're next, bitch. Your Bankai is no match for me even if you reform it, and your distraction plan with the Kido isn't enough to work either. You've lost, he screamed, charging Tsunade like the animal he was. For all she was worth, Tsunade summoned one of her vines to act as a sword. She would try to hold him off as long as she could, enough for her Bankai to reform. But in close quarters, she was doomed. That is, until she felt a strong Ryatsu coming from behind her. Multiple hollows that were giving them a wide berth suddenly suffered from intense slash marks all over their bodies. Someone was carving a path to them. Looks like I finally found my way here. A distinctly human-like voice called out. It was so hard to find you in this mess. A figure stepped out into the clearing, and Tsunade's eyes widened. Who in the fuck are you? Neutra asked. Before I answer that, would you mind backing off of my student? A short old man was walking up to the lanky Neutra, and the mantis Arankar growled at him. There was something he didn't like about the old man, though it was rare for Neutra to not dislike something. The fact that the old man had his Zanpakuto drawn already as a challenge didn't help either. Sarutobi-sensei. Tsunade called out. Grimmjow wiped the blood from his claws on the ground, and growled. A massive ball of acid was hurtling towards him, and he sped away from it without a second thought, even as it crashed into the ground and began dissolving it. Not like I'm gonna let you get away. Niji, check up on Shikamaru. Jiraiya roared. More acid materialized from his conductor's baton, while Grimmjow was still speeding away with Sonito. However, some of the leftover acid from the previous attack had risen up from the ground, and had resumed surging toward Grimmjow. The Septima was even more agile and quick than he was before, and it wasn't like he was particularly slow before he activated his second release. Jiraiya's Shuinpa couldn't even compare to the speed that this Arankar was moving at, so if they wanted to win, he would have to be creative. Here he comes. Jiraiya thought to himself, as Grimmjow flashed into existence right in front of him. The acid was still behind them, and as Jiraiya could see, it was in the Arankar's blind spot. He blocked a paw that was trying to hit him in the face, before Grimmjow spun around and tried to slash at him. Fortunately for him, Jiraiya seemed to be stronger in the physical sense, even though his speed couldn't match up. Come on. Jiraiya thought, bringing his conductor's baton backwards as a giant tidal wave of acid flowed back towards the fighting pair. With his baton still swinging, he covered himself in the acid, which was set up so it wouldn't harm him, creating a liquid shield of the substance. Grimmjow had been reeling back his right arm for an attack, but the animalistic Arankar gave pause when he witnessed both the shielded Jiraiya in front of him and the wave of acid behind him. With an angry growl, Grimmjow pointed both of his paws at the shielded Jiraiya. So, I just can't touch you physically now. I can handle that. Slots opened up on his sharp claws, and in his second state Jiraiya realized that those elbow darts of his were in fact no longer carried at the elbow. Grimmjow fired his darts, the release rate being much quicker than in his first state. Jiraiya leapt away to the side, the shield of acid following him wherever he went. The only thing the barrier would do is prevent Grimmjow from touching him. If any of those darts hit him, the shield would not be able to protect him from harm. He was able to fire 10 of them at once now, and the darts reloaded at a much faster rate. Jiraiya had to keep moving now. He saw the outright craters that those darts made. The wave of acid crashed down where Grimmjow was standing, eating away at the ground as it approached him. Yet Grimmjow was in the air now, dropping darts down on Jiraiya like a bombardment from a plane. Jiraiya-sama, Shikamaru is dead. Our worst fears have been confirmed, Niji said from over where Shikamaru's body lay. Niji had flipped him over and shut his eyes as a sign of respect, but both of their lives were in serious danger with Septima Espada still alive. Shit! Naruto's really turned bad, hasn't he? Directly or indirectly causing the deaths of people he used to care about. Jiraiya grunted. Niji's face darkened. What do we do, Jiraiya-sama? Niji asked, looking to the more experienced man. We have to keep fighting. It doesn't matter that Shikamaru is dead now, as much as I hate to say it. Naruto is still out there and Soul Society is still in danger. We may have to lay down our lives as Shinigami. I was hoping that wouldn't have to be the case. Then again, I was more asking how we defeat our opponent. Kid, I want to ask you the same question. Jiraiya chuckled, throwing his conductor's baton into the air. Grimmjow was watching the entire display, on edge. Jero. The ground rumbled for a moment, and Grimmjow fired an elbow dart at Jiraiya. The former Toad Sage avoided it easily, and kept his stance as he guided 5 identical geysers of acid from within the ground. Like arrows heading toward their small target, they shot at Grimmjow, and the Arrancar was able to show off more of his expert agility to avoid them all. The geysers had been dodged, allowing Grimmjow to come to no harm. And at this point, it was the Septima's turn to go on the offensive. Blue Ryatsu formed in his claws, though he was not preparing for his Descaron. Predator Blanco. 5 tiny blips of blue Ryatsu were cast off from each of his claws, falling down towards Jiraiya. Several of them veered off and landed in the pools of acid left behind, but 3 of the tiny dots found their way to Jiraiya. When Grimmjow snapped his fingers, they exploded into pure white Ryoryoku. Jiraiya winced, though he wasn't fooled by their seemingly harmless appearance coming in. It was more like it was difficult to move while the acid was shielding him. His Shunpa was inactive with the shield up, so he was forced to take some moderate damage as the explosions burned him. Grimmjow laughed when he saw Jiraiya injured, but he seemed to be happier about the fact that it displaced the acid shield that he had up. Shinigami! Grimmjow chanted as he dove at Jiraiya, who now had an unprotected area right over his chest. Now that Jiraiya was limited in movement with a faulty shield, it was the perfect time to press the attack. Jiraiya-sama! Niji cried, trying to hurry over to help Jiraiya when he realized that Grimmjow was headed straight for him. However, Grimmjow far outclassed Niji in terms of speed, and the Hyuga was rendered as only being able to watch as Grimmjow stabbed his claws straight into the unprotected spot on Jiraiya's body. Ah! Grimmjow sighed in pleasure as he felt his claws penetrate Jiraiya's body, before he felt his wrist get grabbed by a large hand, holding the Septima in place. The acid scalded his skin, the digestive fluid of a toad's stomach eating away at his Arrancar armor. It chipped away like bone fragments on the wind, but if it were an arm versus killing his opponent, Grimmjow wasn't sure what he would take. Shit, he's trying to engulf me in that acid. Grimmjow thought, as he saw Jiraiya make some strange movements, like he was thrusting forward. The wounded Shinigami was bleeding heavily, but he didn't seem to be impaired to the point where he was down for the count. Jiraiya was panting at this point, but he kept a firm grip on Grimmjow's right arm, even adding his second arm to grab him around the elbow. Stupid old geezer. I know just the technique to deal with you. Grimmjow sneered at him, charging up more Ryoryoku into his sharp claws. It wasn't the Predator Blanco, however. Descaron. The 5 claws of light extended from Grimmjow's claws as he struck, slashing Jiraiya across the chest and giving him heavy wounds. That was enough for him to relinquish his hold on Grimmjow, and when he was released, the Arrancar immediately put distance between himself and the former Toad Sage, opting to attack with Descaron. Niji attacked, Kinori at the ready, but he Zanpakuto clattered against Grimmjow's sharp claws, before he used his now free arm to form to slash a second Descaron into existence, giving him 10 long claws of blue Ryatsu. Kinori was promptly severed by the stronger technique, the tips of all 5 blades being cut off a couple inches past the tips. The 5-pronged trident was reduced to nothing more than a blunt spear. Grimmjow then kicked Niji in the stomach, sending him flying back several meters. "Ah, now I can get on with it," Grimmjow said, now that Niji's weapon was incapacitated. His other Descaron had broken off, but he formed another one easily when he brought his claws together and shaped a full one, now at full strength. Jiraiya was standing a ways away, his acid shield having fully recovered. He was now deep in concentration, trying his best to will his weaponized acid to do his bidding, even when he was so heavily injured. The time for chit-chat was over. A moment later, and all of it rose from the ground, and within his shield, the conductor's baton flashing to and fro as it rose into a tidal wave of acid, much bigger than the first wave he summoned. "Damn it!" Grimmjow roared, throwing out all his Descaron toward Jiraiya with all the force he could muster. He met the wave of acid head-on, leaping into the air along with his Descaron. And then, it engulfed the Septima, and Jiraiya collapsed to one knee. "Ha, ha!" He breathed heavily, looking at Niji, who was now contemplating his broken Zanpakuto. "I think I got him, that time." The Hyuga was forced to look as 5 blue claws of light emerged from the center of the wave, too fast for the wounded Jiraiya to react to. They pierced his body easily, dragging him back many feet as he was impaled upon them. They burned his flesh, and he tried to dislodge them, but the captain of the 9th Division got them off too late, his Haori now stained with blood as the Descaron stopped moving, and he fell into the dirt. "Jiraiya-sama!" Niji called out. The tidal wave dispersed, and Niji saw what had happened. Grimmjow had emerged from within the center of it all. His body was slightly worn and eaten away by the acid, but he looked more alive than ever. He flashed over to Jiraiya, the critically wounded captain, just able to look up at him. His conductor's baton had fallen off to the side, and his right arm shakily but futilely tried to reach for it. Grimmjow grinned a psychotic grin, as his mask chipped away. Jiraiya lay defeated at the Septima's hands, and Grimmjow smashed his foot into Jiraiya's chest, preventing him from moving and pinning him to the ground. He charged up a blue Zero in one hand, and Jiraiya watched as Grimmjow pointed it at where his head was. It was point blank, and Grimmjow would not miss. Images of Naruto flashed into his mind at the last second, remembering the old student that he once had. He had only seen Naruto for just a few moments as he was now, but it seemed that no matter what he did, the image of the new Naruto wouldn't go away. "Minato! I'm sorry." Grimmjow fired the Zero. At this point, Ichigo was far more like a hollow than he was a Shinigami. It was clear that he had made the jump to controlling his hollow powers even further while he was in Huecomundo. Even coming close to the form he was in now a decade ago was a big no-no on his part, but now, he could do it without losing himself. Everything from his neck to his kneecaps was covered in hollow armor. He had used this hollow form before, back in Las Noches, but he couldn't even control it then. But, he wasn't concerned about his opponent at the moment. Rather, the thick stream of Ryuryoku rising from the very ceiling of the Greater Palace was a cause for concern, especially when it opened a hole in the sky. Ulquiorra noticed it as well. "Looks like he finally did it. The air is being charged with so much Ryatsu," he commented. Ichigo looked at him strangely, the Arrancar was still so calm. "You guys, what the hell were you doing?" Ichigo asked, even as his mask was starting to warp. He was one stage away from the complete hollow form, but that was something he would prefer not to use. "Me, nothing. It is the job of both myself and the other Espada to pick off threats such as you so Naruto himself can reach the Soul King. What you are seeing is his doing, and the realization of his master plan. You need not concern yourself with it. Instead, focus your attention on me," he explained, gripping his green lance like a life support. Then, he threw it. Ichigo seemed to be unprepared for an assault like that, but he responded in kind with his signature Getsuga Tensho, which met the Luz de la Luna midway and dematerialized it. Ulquiorra had already materialized another two, one for each hand, while Ichigo had wrapped his blade in the Getsuga Tensho. It's stronger than before. The more he becomes a hollow, the stronger that attack gets. It's not just that technique either. His speed and physical strength is increasing as well. Yet the holes in his fighting style are primarily the same. The Segunda shot out with both lances, clashing one of them against Ichigo's Getsuga Tensho empowered blade. While it shattered almost immediately against it, he used the time in between to wrap his remaining one around Ichigo's head in preparation for the kill, while simultaneously forming another one in his other hand. Ichigo reacted beautifully, pushing off of Ulquiorra while charging up a Zero in his mouth to knock away from the other lance before it could reach his head. The attack exploded on the bridge a while away in a shower of green and red, while Ulquiorra primed the third and final Luz de la Luna to impale Ichigo through the stomach. It clipped Ichigo in the side of his hollow armor, exposing the Shinigami robes underneath. Yet, with a final Getsuga, he repelled Ulquiorra as well, along with creating another crack in the bridge. The hollow armor was already repairing itself, while Ulquiorra was yet again flying towards him. Their weapons met once again, but Ulquiorra used his flight to leap over and deliver a potent stab to an unprotected area on Ichigo's back. The energy seared Ichigo's flesh, but he repaired the damage by allowing more armor to cover his form, getting closer and closer to the perfect form. He looped his arm around his own back, charging up a hot red and white Zero from his fingertips. Zero again? Perhaps the reason you are keeping up with me is because you are truly becoming more like a hollow. Ulquiorra stated. I figured that out a long time ago. Yet, it's still not as strong. Zero Oscurus. The two Zeros met against one another, and it was clear that neither one could gain much ground. They were about even in their respective strengths, though it was Ichigo who pulled out first. The bridge they were fighting on was becoming unstable, but neither fighter stopped themselves from using their full strengths because of some bridge instability. Zero. A hollow mask. Sonido. You have ceased to use nearly all of your Shinigami powers. The closest thing I can describe you as right now is an imitation hollow. The closest you can get to the real thing. Well, gee, thanks for that. Obviously what I want is to be compared to a hollow by you of all people. But the time I spent in Huecomundo taught me not to be ashamed of using this power. Even though I don't like using my strongest form, I think I'm going to show it to you regardless. Ichigo was cut off from doing anything when a loud boom surrounded the area, shaking everything from the earth to the sky to the core. Even the soul stream at the top of the palace seemed to warp a bit as orange Ryatsu exploded from the roof of the greater palace, gleaming in the setting sunlight. The Ryatsu was thick, very thick, that Ulquiorra had to temporarily stop and contemplate his own demise, even if he was not directly in the thick of things. What was that? Ichigo asked. Ulquiorra looked at the boy in front of him, and could see clearly how much his skin was crawling from being exposed to it, even at this distance. He was sweating. He must really be having a difficult fight. Ulquiorra commented. Not even when he killed Aizen did he have to go this far. Be thankful that you have not experienced his segunda etapa. He is a creature you do not wish to comprehend. Death would be a preferable fate for the likes of you. Ichigo looked troubled. That's not the only thing I'm worried about. Ulquiorra looked up. There was the familiar aspect of Naruto's Ryatsu, but sky was beginning to become torn apart. The silver-gray soul stream was still feeding into the sky at a faster and faster rate, but the sky was no longer blue, it was a reflection of another place. A reflection of Karakura town. Ichigo whispered, seeing the reflection of his old hometown in the sky. The gap between dimensions is beginning to become blurred. Ulquiorra commented. Ichigo stared at him as if he were crazy, but he was still perturbed by the appearance of his hometown in the sky, even if it was just a reflection. Or was it a reflection? What do you wish to do, Kurosaki Ichigo? Are you in a hurry? Will you show me your true hollow form? Ichigo's mask was already beginning to change. Yeah. I don't know what's going on, but I have to stop it. Taking on my strongest hollow form is the quickest and easiest way to defeat you. I must reach Naruto immediately. The black and red Ryatsu had reached a peak within Ichigo at this point, and his mask was the first change that happened. In addition to that, the hollow armor spread down from his kneecaps to his feet, covering his Shinigami body from head to toe in hollow-based armor. His hair began to grow longer until it was a long orange mane, and two horns jutted out from his mask and framed his face. At that moment, two things happened. 1. Ichigo's Ryatsu skyrocketed from its already high state, mixing in with the strong Ryatsu that was already mingling in the air. Second, the normally abrasive and talkative Shinigami fell silent. Not even a peep was heard from Ichigo's masked face at this point, and frankly, Ulquiorra didn't really care. So, that's it. Naruto told me about the strange Shinigami boy who had all the characteristics of a hollow. You look the part, but I still don't feel the bloodlust. Ichigo still didn't say anything, even though it was clear he was still very much in control of himself and understood fully what Ulquiorra said. In this hollow form, he just didn't talk much. The bridge is beginning to give out. I hope you realize that such a thing would only inconvenience you. Ulquiorra said, flapping his big black wings. Ichigo didn't seem to care, pointing his sword at Ulquiorra. The wind and Ryatsu was already beginning to pick up. Ichigo let loose with a casual slice vertically, like he wasn't even trying to hit Ulquiorra. Yet the force from the strike was strong enough to put another gash in the bridge, and if it had hit Ulquiorra, it most likely would have severed a wing with just the wind alone. But perhaps you have the necessary skills regardless. Ulquiorra commented, rescinding his previous statement. While he monologued, he dimly became aware of the body pressing up behind him, cold hollow mask digging into his wings. What? When did he get behind me? Ulquiorra asked himself, before he found himself staring at the wrong end of a black blade. He folded his wing, just barely avoiding the stab, before throwing one of his lances to offset the next slash. His regenerative powers were not particularly at their strongest while he was in his first release, so he had to tread lightly. He managed to block the blade with his energy lance, but the force from Ichigo's swing was so strong that the luz rippled and then went out. It wasn't exactly heartbreaking though, as Ulquiorra quickly summoned another two. The problem therein lied when Ichigo used the time necessary for Ulquiorra to create another lance to charge up a zero in the center of his horns. Ulquiorra allowed a rare look of surprise to enter his features, as he felt the sheer strength of the Ryatsu being emitted. Ulquiorra flapped his wings harder, bringing himself to a halt in midair. An attack like this would damage the bridge, but he didn't know if it was able to overpower him. Then, Ichigo released the zero, just as Ulquiorra charged up his own Zero Oscuras to deflect it. The result was the white-hot zero of the Ichigo easily overpowering the dark zero of Ulquiorra, resulting in a massive explosion that shook the bridge to its core. Zero Oscuras is no good. What is going on? His hollow powers are off the charts. Just a normal zero was able to completely nullify the specialized Zero Oscuras. Maybe I should. Ulquiorra trailed off, as he saw the entrance to the Greater Soul Palace ahead. When he looked behind him, he saw Ichigo standing on the bridge below, calmly calculating his next move. He was waiting for Ulquiorra, personally. But, it wasn't Ichigo that Ulquiorra was concerned about. Two figures were covering the distance to him quickly, running around the collapsing bridge. More Shinigami. I wonder if I should bait Kurosaki Ichigo, and take the chance with some of my stronger attacks. Ulquiorra thought. The bridge may now be unstable, but with his wings. Wait a second, he has not shown the ability to levitate on air in this form yet, but it would be foolish to assume he did not have the ability. But the aerial advantage should not fall to him either way. Ulquiorra commented. Very well. Kurosaki Ichigo. You have proven beyond the shadow of a doubt that you are a hollow. Ridiculous as it may be, your power speaks for itself. Consider yourself worthy to view this form. Only those who know true despair, the hollows, will be able to understand just what I'm about to show you. Ulquiorra. Ichigo finally muttered, his voice coming out of his mask like a guttural echo, a warped perversion of his normal voice. A thick deep green and black Ryatsu surrounded Ulquiorra like it was molasses, engulfing his form-fitting body and warping it into something even more different. Naruto knew that Sakura was as loony a being as he was, and that she wouldn't be surprised by anything. But the way she fell into the soul stream with the look of shock on her face told him that she didn't really see this coming. Though to be more logical, she probably didn't see it coming that soon. The two in front of him were royal guards. Sakura likely figured that he valued his life more than his hatred of her, so they would band together to defeat Akane and Taiki. Like I'd ever get beaten by these losers. He had his back turned to them, but the very minute sound of movement started told him everything he needed to know. As Sakura was assimilated into the soul stream and her body disappeared, Naruto placed a hand on the hilt of his sword without hesitation. He saw his reflection in the steel of the cutlass, and the reflection of his apparent sister in his blind spot, her own Zanpakuto, a viciously long odachi with a red hilt, drawn. With a quick sonido, he turned the tables on her, appearing in her blind spot in preparation for a stabbing motion. But Akane was prepared for that, and she had already altered the course of her blade in Michuanpa, nearly stabbing Naruto straight through the jugular on the redirection of her blade. He had blocked it with his own. HRGGH. Naruto growled, the blade hovering just a few inches away from his face. Judging by the Ryatsu coating that thing, his arrow wouldn't have been able to hold up from the deadly strike. Enough chatter. As a threat to the livelihood of Soul Society, you will execute it on the spot, Uzumaki Naruto. The machine you have activated will be shut down. I swear I will not allow you to succeed in your plan. Akane shouted. Pretty talk, Naruto said, pulling their blades apart. But why did you just stand around when I killed the Soul King? Did it really take him dying for you to finally disobey an order from him? Naruto sneered, laughing uproariously. The Soul King's orders are absolute. Akane stated, before she pressed the offensive. She unleashed a flurry of quick jabs, to which Naruto backpedaled hastily while blocking every one of them. She followed up with a wide swing to try and knock him off his feet, but the Primera responded in turn with a quick jab of his own to knock her wind-up out of sync. Naruto grinned and turned his blade over, but a flash of light caught his eye, and he instinctively covered his face with his arms as an explosion of smoke and green Ryatsu appeared right where he was standing. A level 70 Hadu without even uttering a single word? Naruto thought to himself. His arrow absorbed most of the damage, but he glanced out of the smoke to see Taiki smirking at him, not even having drawn his own sword yet. A flash of substance, and Naruto pulled his arm up as it was lightly scratched from wrist to elbow by a blade. A few droplets of blood leaked from the wound, but Naruto shrugged it off. The Kido was a distraction, but Taiki's sister couldn't deal much damage in the follow-up. These cramped quarters are getting on my nerves. Naruto growled, before he heard a clatter of steel. Taiki had drawn his own Zanpakuto from his sheath, a skinny katana that was much smaller than his sister's odachi. He wasn't wasting any time, as held the sword parallel to his body. Uphold, Raisin Bashira. The katana began to morph right in front of Naruto's eyes, as it took on the shape of a pitch-black club made of the darkest steel. Naruto was unimpressed. It looked like an oversized baseball bat with a flat top. Is that it? Naruto asked, blocking a strike from Akane behind him. Taiki merely smirked, getting in front of Naruto and buffeting him with the club. Naruto winced, but otherwise did not move back an inch. Some slight blood leaked from his mouth, but what was more important was what was happening to Taiki's Zanpakuto. A small one had been engraved onto the side of the black metal, and it began to glow with his Ryatsu. If anyone expected Taiki to give a great monologue on how his Shurikai worked, they would be let down. Instead, he swung it forward, apparently not even trying to hit Naruto. The Arrancar was confused, until he began to see a large purple box enclose itself around him. Shit! Zero! Naruto roared, launching his orange Zero as he broke his way out of the Kurohitsuji. He didn't understand, Taiki hadn't so much as uttered a word. In fact, he swung his sword, and Kido surrounded him. And that number that was etched into the club. What was it? His Shurikai is making his Kido stronger. The more hits he scores, the more effectively he is able to cast it. I'm willing to bet that thing is a conductor for it too. Maybe. He was cut out in his thought process when he had to block a strike from below when Akane had attacked him in close quarters yet again. The walls behind them split apart at the seams from their swordplay, before Naruto kicked her in the stomach. She leaped it over it, but Naruto was charging up energy into his sword. Zero Corazon. Akane shrieked as the zero-charged Zanpakuto conducted up from her own hilt and blade and into body. Naruto thrust out his free hand, putting it right in her face. Los Tres Cuves. Akane ducked her head as the three crescent-shaped blades of Ryatsu threatened to scalp her, but the Sokatsui from Taiki prevented Naruto from attacking her further. Bala Siguiendo. Naruto launched his famous homing bala, not bothering to watch as he careened toward Taiki. Meanwhile, the Sokatsui was still hurtling toward him, but Naruto's Ryatsu manipulation came in handy. With a wave of his hand, the blue fire halted on its way here, and Naruto willed it to puff out on the ground before him. The Royal Guard member Taiki had avoided his bala siguiendo easily, following up with a mid to high level Hades spell that Naruto didn't recognize. It was like an arrow of fire, and Taiki had launched it from his shuriken as well. Taiki, knock it off with the Kido for a moment. Let me take him one-on-one for a while. We need to find a weakness. Akane roared, touching down in front of Naruto, her sealed Zanpakuto clutched tightly. She had recovered from the nasty shock she had received earlier, now more on edge with Naruto's Zero Corazon that she knew she couldn't touch at the time being. Naruto smirked. Zero Venenoso. Naruto charged up his toxic purple Zero with his free Zero, throwing it out into the battlefield for Akane to deal with it. She avoided it easily, but she had been forced on the defensive with regards to Naruto's Zero Corazon, so the Primera could throw anything he wanted at her now. Akane, stop fucking around with your sealed Zanpakuto. We need to go shuriken immediately and end this as soon as possible. I know. It's just, we're the Royal Guard, we haven't teamed up in order to win a fight in so long. It's kinda surreal. Akane commented, to which Taiki grunted his agreement. I know. But this would be a good time to start. This guy killed the Sotaicho of Soul Society. Sure. I suppose it is. Let's just finish this up, shall we? Akane twirled her odachi on her fingertip, before lifting it up and tossing it into the air, before catching it again with one hand. Amaze, Shinkagafu. Akane's shuriken practically exploded into a burst of red Ryatsu, hilt and all. Yet, Naruto wasn't fooling himself in believing that activating her shuriken would leave her weaponless, and he wasn't disappointed. Akane herself wasn't perturbed, and not long after she released her Zanpakuto, a small red crystal materialized in the palm of her hand. After some seconds it became more numerous, as more crystals appeared and attached to each other. Wow! Naruto said, similarly leading credence to her release command, but it wasn't because of any combat prowess she had shown in the last couple of minutes. In fact, Akane was now holding a beautiful red crystalline sword that shined in the light every time she moved. There appeared to be a small amount of liquid running within it through little cracks and canals, though Naruto didn't know what the effect of that would cause. You like? So sharp it can cut through anything. Even your sword. Akane smirked, charging Naruto with her advanced Shuinpa. Naruto took a step back, but was able to match her speed and even somewhat exceed it. What he was more surprised by was when he clanged his sealed Zanpakuto against Akane's crystal sword, watching as the metal began to get sliced by the sharper weapon. He had used up all of his Zero Corazon, which meant that the bare blade was no match for the crystal one. Damn it! Naruto growled, pulling away as Akane pressed the offensive. Bala Rayo, he roared, throwing a few lasers her way, which were promptly reflected back. They missed Naruto, who had used Sonido to appear behind, trying to thread a stab directly into the back of her neck. Akane wasn't as fast as Naruto, and the Primera grinned when he realized he still had that advantage on her. She turned at the last moment, putting up her sword to block as she gained a slight scratch on the back of her neck. Zero Corazon. With the charged Zero in his sword, Naruto attempted to see if he could bypass Akane's crystal shuriken. To his delight, Akane was once again shocked by the concentrated Zero sword, but before he could press the offensive, he felt his arrow almost get broken by a strike to the back. He hadn't forgotten Taiki, who had clearly shown up to aid his sister. But at that point, he had retreated away, and his black club now had the number 2 engraved all over it. He seemed to be grasping their fighting styles at this point. Taiki, despite the large club, was the one who hung back at a distance, attacking with range and delivering blows only when necessary. His Zanpakuto was connected to Kido in a way Naruto didn't understand, so that definitely helped. Akane, with her crystal sword, was the close-quarters, physical fighter, which was much less difficult to figure out. But that sword of hers was difficult to deal with. He could somewhat control Yamamoto's shuriken with his Ryatsu willing powers, but he didn't have such luck here. Jiguchi, Akane whispered, as the little veins of liquid beneath the crystal of the sword began to leak out from small holes in the crystalline substance. With a smirk, she rushed forward. Naruto sped around her again, this time meeting her sword with his Zero Corazon. Akane was clearly shocked by Naruto's Zanpakuto, but she didn't let the smirk drop from her face, and held fast onto the contact. The red liquid from within coated Naruto's Zanpakuto, which was just what she wanted. When Naruto slashed at her, to which she barely managed to get away, she shouted at her brother. "Now, Taiki!" There was no warm-up, no prelude. Taiki simply fired the Hata number 31, Shakuhou from his club without anything. Normally, a spell in the 30s would be nothing more than a distraction for Naruto, but the twins' plan was layered. "Oh, that stuff on your Zanpakuto? It's basically the equivalent of spiritual gasoline." Taiki smirked. Naruto looked at his sword in amazement, before he put it to the side. If the ball of fire hit it. He put his sword back into his sheath, and casually sidestepped the ball of fire. As it passed, he felt the heat still concentrate within his sheathed Zanpakuto, but he didn't catch fire. "Gotcha," Taiki said, smirking. The tandem attack that the twins just performed did not stop when the ball of fire did not hit Naruto. Unbeknownst to the Primera Espada, a crawling red rope of Kido had materialized underneath the ground beneath his very feet, and while Naruto was occupied, they wrapped around his ankles, interlocking with each other to create a web of reinforced Bakudo that continued to spread up his body, interlocking Naruto's arms and binding him. "The fuck? Bakudo?" Naruto hissed. Where did it come from? 2 Kido at once without any sort of prelude? Taiki seemed to be responsible for this one, at least. "Got him, Akane. You can proceed when ready." "Thanks, little brother. I'll take him from here." Akane called back, scratching her crystal shuriken with her nails. "Don't bother to struggle your way out of this one. That Kido's about as reinforced as can." "Raga!" Naruto roared, charging up his full Ryatsu. The strength of it stunned the twins, but Naruto found that his movement was still very limited. In that, he was at a disadvantage. "You little shits. You're fucking dead!" Naruto roared, thrashing about with as much effort as he could muster. The Kido was strong, he knew that much, but with enough effort, he found he could move his arms and legs slightly. Zero Espiral. What the? He's able to move like that? Taiki cried, on edge. Naruto was gathering orange Ryatsu in his palms, twisting them together to form his strongest Zero. "Better take cover," Naruto mocked. "This place is gonna get a little messy after this." Naruto released the Zero, creating a vortex of Zero that spread all over the room. With 2 quick shunpos, the twins moved away just in time to avoid the vortex of Zero, but when they reappeared, they were standing near the edge of the room, trying to get away from the vortex. The Zero Espiral sliced into the stone walls of the building, and a loud crash was heard as the right-hand wall was shattered and broke into large chunks as the Zero Espiral consumed it. A large hole was present in the stone now. "Damn it! I'm still not free, and this bind isn't breaking. Maybe I should." He was promptly slashed in the back. Ugh! Naruto winced as blood poured from the wound in his back. He didn't even need to see who had attacked him this time. Akane with her crystal sword had managed to get the jump on him because of his handicap. I need more space, Naruto muttered, as the shadow of Akane fell over him immediately. He lifted his hand to fire a distraction zero point blank at her, but her reflexes allowed her to avoid it easily. You're not getting away, Akane roared, as Naruto scrambled to his feet slowly and inched his way to the hole in the wall. He was incapable of using Sonido at this point, but with some effort, he managed to draw his sword. Taiki, come on. He's trying to do something. Akane yelled at her brother, who hefted his club over his shoulder and followed his sister. Fuck you, Naruto roared, grunted as he clanged his sword against Akane's crystal. He didn't care if the Shurikai was cutting it slightly, he just needed to hold them off. What? Taiki screamed. When Naruto had reached the hole, he threw himself out the window and grabbed onto the brick surface on the side of the palace with his teeth. Roaring in exertion, he pulled himself up quickly as he could, while his siblings stared out the hole at him. He's trying to get to the roof. Hurry! We have to follow him. The secret chambers of the Soul King were approximately 100 feet below the very top of the building, the carved-out roof of the palace. The Soul Stream was also likely being shot through the roof into the sky. Hada number 33, Sokatsui. Akane roared, launching the blue fire at Naruto, who was quickly making his way up to the roof. With surprising nimbleness, he flipped over the fire heading straight for him, catching the ledge with his teeth as he went down. Akane glared at him, before she and Taiki used Shuinpa to instantly get to the top of the roof, looking down upon Naruto. Akane was about to use her sword to knock him off the ledge, but Naruto was prepared. He had already taken the great effort needed to point his hand up at them and launched a normal zero at both siblings. They were forced to duck underneath the beam, which allowed Naruto to swing himself over the ledge and land upon the extraordinarily wide roof. Yes! Ha ha ha! Naruto guffawed, bringing himself to his feet and staring down his two siblings. I can finally get on with it, he said in relief. His sword was still drawn. Like Akane thought, the Soul Stream was still directly behind them, shooting up into the sky. With that in mind, that wasn't the truly surprising thing. It's a city, Taiki said, mouth agape. A city in the sky. Not quite, Naruto said, looking at the image of Karakura Town high in the sky. What you're seeing right now is a reflection of the human world within the sky that acts as a portal. However, don't let this news put you at ease, it means that the Soul Stream is linking the dimensions together now. You monster! Akane growled. Monster? Me? Let me tell you something, this entire place is repulsive. Souls passing on to this world and Shinigami? Give me a break. Considering the way that humans became hollows almost universally back in the old days, it seems that hollification is actually the true afterlife here. Your soul society and Shinigami garbage is disgusting and unnatural, so in a way, maybe I'm actually doing the world good. Naruto thought out loud. Soul society is finished. Try to stop the Soul Stream, if you can. But now, your stupid little Kido may be able to hold me, but I'm determined to kill you in the slowest, most painful way possible. He held his sword out, but the two siblings looked perplexed. What? You're wondering what I'm going to do now? Naruto began. Let me say, I've mellowed out a little bit over the years. I'm not as passionate as I once was. There was once a time when I would be screaming in insanity, attacking you with full force and laughing all the way. I'm not so energetic anymore, in this state, he said, grinning. He leveled the blade, allowing it to float in midair and glow with orange Ryatsu. Be warned, though. When I release my Zanpakuto. Naruto began, hitting the hilt of his Zanpakuto and allowing it to twirl around in midair. Akane and Taiki's eyes widened. Oh, shit! Akane cursed. Everything goes back to the way it once was. He finished. Naruto grabbed the blade from its perch with deft agility, pulling it back and holding it at his side. Kill. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you enjoyed this what if and want to see next part of it, comment down below and let me know. Also share this video with your friends. See you in the next video. Peace.